Horror Haven's new horror story. Unearthly man in front of my house. I'm an 18-year-old student living separately from my parents. I don't want to tell the story that happened to me this summer. It was summer of hot July, apparently, cool on the street. Unlike the daytime of the evening, I corresponded with my friend on the social network, reviewing different videos on YouTube. There were several freshly prepared sandwiches at hand. A video of my favorite blogger was opened on the screen. The only thing was missing to create the perfect atmosphere was a warm tea. After a few minutes, I went to the kitchen, put the kettle on to boil, and I stared looking out the window on the street. It was already dark and cool around. I can't have anyone around. After a few minutes, the kettle informed me that the water had boiled. I put it on the windows to cool down. I didn't want to go to the room, so I decided to wait until the drink cools down, and at that time enjoy the view of the deserted streets of Moscow. 2 minutes passed and a tall man of 6 feet 2, maybe tall, shaved bald in a white shirt, stained with red paint on the collar, with a huge apparently wearing an old belt and wide trousers. He walked at a slow pace, whistling some strange song, then stopped and stared looking out the window of the first floor. I live on the second. I felt a little terribly strange. I was thinking that why would a normal person in the middle of the night look at other people's windows? I didn't feel like it for a long time, so I took tea that hadn't cooled down yet. I hurried to the room. There were already more than 20 messages in my phone, and I quickly told my friend about the strange scene. Of course he didn't believe it, although he asked to take a picture of him. I didn't, of course, refused, arguing that he had already left. In fact, I just didn't want to see him again. This topic was quickly hushed up under the vault of the news. We were hotly discussing on the street. It was already dark. The clock showed me 1 hour and 42 minutes. But I didn't think to leave the boundaries of the internet, like my friend who had just told me that he's going to take a shower and then sleep, because tomorrow he had to get up early and find out about work. Of course, sitting alone was much more boring, but since I didn't want to sleep at all, I decided to look again at some videos on YouTube. I also decided to take a shower. I turned on the water in the bathroom while it was filling up. I decided to sit in the kitchen. It was hot. I opened the window. I stare at the street and suddenly I see a man like an ordinary man, but there is something strange in him. I don't even know what a song is going on. He sings some kind of song, but he stopped when he approached my house, looks into the windows of the first floor, looked for about 5 minutes, turned his eyes to the second floor. Well, I thought, or he's waiting for some friend. Okay, and here he is to understand. He looked out of my windows right at me and immediately stopped. Drinking, and a grin appeared on his face, a terrible grin. I swear to you, I've almost built a creek, and the creek hasn't been built yet. And then he yelled in an inhuman voice. It blew up his face, changed as if it were ink, although maybe it's for me. He yelled like that something is under his feet. My water in the washroom overflowed and I went to turn it off. Then I go to the kitchen, but that person is already gone already. Maybe he glitched me, although he also seemed strange to me. But you have to look at the world for a real walk. Maybe he's drunk, so he's looking at other people's windows. But who will shelter him? Well, I had a bath and went to sleep while watching video on YouTube. After all, the next day passed quickly enough for me. I wanted to visit my friend, who he lives opposite my house, but then I remembered that he had left for work and he's probably not at home. I didn't call him and didn't bother. I noticed that he didn't appear on the social network. He usually come home no later than 5 p.m. to be honest. I started to worry a little, but immediately calmed myself down with the fact that he could be with his new girlfriend. You never know. At night, I saw approximately 23:53 on the clock. I went to the kitchen wildly, overcome my thirst from cold water, and began to drink. Along the way, looking out the window, suddenly that man again appeared on the street in the same clothes, the same, singing the same song with the same steps. in front of my house, and with the same gaze at the first floor, he was already shaking. But what happened next is more scary. He looked directly into my eyes, then such a malicious grin appeared on his face that I almost choked on water. Further, his mouth opened to an incredible width and yelled heart-rendingly, loudly and furiously, "My God!" This cry, I didn't hear anything more terrible more than that. At that moment, it seemed to me that his face darkened, turned into just a black spot. His skin sagged almost to the shoulders, dropped from the hands, just like a melted glass. I rushed into my room. I was shaking. Probably 15 minutes after what happened, I could barely stand. I wanted to go to bed. Suddenly there was a loud knock on the door with force, as if someone on the other side of the door wanted to break it down, and I sat in a stupor, afraid to move. The knock on the door lasted about half an hour, then everything calmed down. I turned off the lights of my house and woke up at 1 o'clock the next day, not remembering anything. Maybe it was for the better. After a few days, the memories from my head gradually disappeared. I blamed everything on myself and on my imagination. I was too exhausted and tired, and it seemed like that had happened because of my own consciousness until I found out about the terrible death of my friend, in which I refused to believe. He was hung in the kitchen right in front of the window. His head was neatly shaved and bald like a good hairdresser shaved his head. His throat was cut down with a sharp knife on the collar of his shirt. There were drops of blood that fell out from a cut throat. His mother, with whom we were on fairly good terms, did not inform about this to me. As soon as I found out his death, I realized who was to blame for this. Whether he was a maniac, whether he was some kind of otherworldly force in the guise of a man. And I know, but since then, I never saw that person again. Maybe he was there to fulfill his thirst of blood, but still one thing's haunt my mind: when he will come back to fulfill his appetite. For more scary and haunted stories, follow Horror Haven.